No one, not even the most paranoid Western intelligence agencies, could have predicted this. Ibrahim Traoré's elite digital army had silently infiltrated the hidden databases of some of the most guarded museums in Europe and America. But what they found was not just stolen art. It was the buried truth of Africa itself, truth that could rewrite history and bring empires to their knees. The night was quiet in Ouagadougou, but inside a dimly lit cyber operations room, a war was about to begin. Ibrahim Traoré stood before a wall of glowing monitors. His digital army, a hand-picked team of the most brilliant African hackers, awaited his signal. These weren't ordinary hackers. They were engineers, cryptographers, and former intelligence operatives. Every one of them had been trained for one mission: reclaim the stolen soul of Africa. "We start in 5, Traoré said calmly. His voice was steady, but the weight of the mission was colossal. Targets: the British Museum, the Louvre, the Smithsonian, and more. Not the public websites, not the online archives, but the private, encrypted servers that no outsider was ever supposed to touch. The servers that held the real inventory. At 2 a.m. GMT, the first wave began. Lines of code danced across the screens. Firewalls fell like sand castles before a rising tide. Multi-layer security was dismantled in seconds. One operative, codename Zulu, breached the Louvre's inner vault database. Another, Kilimanjaro, cracked the Smithsonian's offline artifact logs. Within minutes, hidden directories began to appear, and that's when the shock set in. The team had expected colonial-era loot, masks, jewels, statues. But this was something else entirely. Entire catalogs marked "never exhibited to public." Hundreds of artifacts with African origins, but no public records. Ancient scrolls written in languages historians claimed were lost. Ivory carvings predating the oldest known African kingdoms. Maps, yes, maps, showing African trade routes centuries before European contact. Traoré leaned in closer. "Download everything," he ordered. Zulu's voice broke the silence. "Sir, there's more." He clicked on a file labeled Restricted Level Omega. Inside, photographs of artifacts never acknowledged in any book. Items suggesting African civilizations had reached the Americas long before Columbus. Evidence that Africa's empires were not just powerful, but global. Kilimanjaro's voice trembled. They knew. They've known for centuries. Gigabytes of data flowed into encrypted African servers, but then alarms began to trigger. The Western servers had detected the breach. Counter-hacking teams were mobilizing. "They're coming in hard," one of the hackers shouted. Traoré didn't flinch. "Hold them off for 10 more minutes." The battle became digital warfare. Firewalls rebuilt themselves as quickly as they were torn down. Trojan counterattacks flooded African IP addresses. But the digital army was ready. They deployed decoy servers in Iceland, encrypted routing through dozens of countries. 3 more minutes, shouted Zulu. Another screen flashed red, incoming trace attempt from Langley. Traoré's cyber defenders unleashed AI-generated code barriers. The American trace collapsed instantly. "Download complete." Relief swept through the room, but only for a second. The Western counterattack intensified. They were trying to wipe their own servers to erase the evidence. "They're deleting the files," Kilimanjaro warned. "Not on my watch," Traoré said. His voice was cold steel. They launched a reverse lock protocol, freezing the museum servers entirely. The Western tech teams were locked out of their own systems. For the first time in history, the colonizers were powerless. The data was safe in Burkinafaso's encrypted vault. But Traoré knew this wasn't just about data. It was about truth. "We moved to Phase 2, he announced. Phase 2 was not a cyber operation. It was a political earthquake. The next morning, African state media released a single image, a golden mask from Mali, dated over 3,000 years old, taken from a hidden British museum vault. The caption read, "Africa Remembers." The image went viral in seconds. Social media erupted with outrage. Hashtags calling for the return of stolen heritage flooded Twitter and TikTok. Western governments scrambled to deny the claims. But denial was useless. Traoré's digital army began releasing proof in waves, scans of hidden inventories, photographs from deep storage rooms, shipping records from colonial expeditions, even private emails between curators admitting the truth. The world was stunned. The narrative of benevolent preservation crumbled. Instead, the West was exposed as the largest cultural thief in human history. African leaders rallied behind Burkinafaso. Demands for repatriation of artifacts surged. Street protests erupted in Nigeria, Ghana, Ethiopia, and beyond. Students in London staged sit-ins at the British Museum's entrance. The Louvre was surrounded by thousands chanting, "Return what you stole." UNESCO was forced into emergency meetings. Western diplomats begged for negotiations. Traoré remained silent. The silence was louder than any speech. In the meantime, his team decrypted the ancient scrolls. Inside were royal decrees, scientific notes, and astronomical charts, far more advanced than European records of the same period. The revelations kept coming. Gold coins minted by African empires before Rome existed. Navigation tools that predated European compasses. Written proof of African expeditions to Asia and the Americas. It wasn't just history being rewritten, it was history being restored. In Washington, think tanks warned that this was more dangerous than any missile. "He's not just attacking our institutions," one analyst said. "He's attacking the foundation of our legitimacy." In Paris, museum directors resigned. In London, politicians faced parliamentary inquiries. The public began questioning. If they had lied about history, what else had they lied about? Traoré understood the moment. He held a press conference in Ouagadougou. The room was packed with journalists from around the globe. "These artifacts," he said, "are not just objects. They are the memory of our ancestors. And memory cannot be owned by thieves." Applause thundered through the hall. "We do not ask," Traoré continued. "We demand their return." Western governments hesitated. Returning them meant admitting guilt. Not returning them meant confirming the theft. Traoré had them trapped. Over the next month, crates began arriving in African capitals. One by one, the treasures returned home. The golden mask of Mali, the Benin bronzes, the Ashanti royal regalia, the ancient Ethiopian manuscripts. Each arrival was celebrated like the return of a long-lost king. Elders wept, children danced. The air was filled with drums and ululations. For the first time in centuries, Africa was reclaiming itself. But there was still one last file, a file Traoré had kept secret from everyone. Inside was evidence of something even more explosive. Not just stolen artifacts, but stolen inventions. Blueprints for machines, tools, and weapons invented in Africa long before Europe. If revealed, they could shatter the myth of European technological superiority forever. Traoré stared at the file for hours. Some truths, he knew, could change the world overnight. But was the world ready? He called his top advisors. The room was divided. Some argued for full release. Others warned it could trigger all-out economic war. In the end, Traoré made his decision. He smiled faintly. "The truth," he said, "does not need permission." The file went live. Within hours, headlines exploded. Ancient African blueprints could rewrite global history. Western tech roots linked to stolen African inventions. Panic spread in financial markets. Stock prices of major Western tech firms plummeted. Patents were challenged in international courts. The myth of Western innovation crumbled. In its place, a new narrative was born, one where Africa was not a footnote, but a chapter head. Universities rewrote curricula. Documentaries flooded streaming platforms. The West could no longer claim ownership of the future, because the past was no longer theirs to control. Months later, the digital army disbanded quietly. Their mission was complete, but in secret they remained connected, ready for the next fight. Traore walked through the new National Museum in Ouagadougou. Everywhere he looked, he saw history restored, not behind glass for tourists, but alive among the people it belonged to. Elders told stories beside the artifacts. Children traced the carvings with their fingers. Drummers played rhythms that had been silent for generations. This was not just a victory. It was a resurrection. Outside, the world still argued, but in Africa, something had shifted forever. The continent had taken back more than stolen art. It had taken back its story. As Traore stood in the doorway, he thought of the battles ahead. There would be resistance. There would be retaliation. But the truth was now free. And once freed, it could never be caged again. "Sir," an aide approached. "Another message from the digital unit." "What is it?" Traore asked. They found something else, not in a museum this time, but in a private European bank vault. Traore's eyes narrowed. "Tell them to prepare." The aide hesitated. "Prepare for what?" Traore's voice was a whisper, but it carried like thunder. "For history's second resurrection." Outside, the African sun blazed bright, but somewhere in the west, the shadows grew longer, because they knew. The first storm had only just begun, and this time no vault on Earth would be safe. The hunt for the rest of Africa's soul had only started.